the preliminary remarks regarding Shemini Atzaret. Just so you know, so you don't get your hopes up, this is not going to be a Shemini Atzaret teaching. We have several good Shemini Atzaret teachings on our website, on our YouTube channel that are quite good and quite deep and go through a lot of mysterious passages of Scripture and how they tie together, and I think that you will enjoy those if you decide you want to check them out, and I'll tell you about them in just a moment. But what I'm going to do first is I want to share my my tab with you regarding the Scripture of Shemini Atzaret. Let's see, Mikey, you got a thumbs up for me? Excellent, thank you very much. And now the first slide is talking about Shemini Atzaret. Now, Shemini Atzaret is from Leviticus 23:36. It says, this is the end of the section about Sukkot. It says, "For 7 days you shall present an offering by fire to Yah. On the 8th, that is Shemini, day, you shall have a holy convocation and present an offering by fire to Yah. It is an assembly, Atzaret. You shall do no laborious work." So there is Shemini Atzaret. Now, Shemini and Atzaret are not like right next to each other, you know, as you might expect. They are separated by a couple of words. And the words Shemini Atzaret, I believe, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but Shemini Atzaret only appears in the Bible, in the Tanakh 3 times. Once at the beginning of Passover, the last day of Passover is also, it's not a Shemini, it's an Atzaret. But in Nehemiah and Ezra, you do get mention of this because, as you probably remember, they were rediscovering their roots when they came back from the Babylonian captivity, and they did recognize, because they found a Torah scroll when they were, you know, digging through the rubble, and they said, "Man, we got to hold, we got to go get some palm branches, and we got to build some sukkahs, and we're going to stay in these things." And they read from the Torah of Yah for that 7-day period, and then they held a great festival, the Shemini Atzaret, on the 8th day, and then they decided to stay an additional 7 days because it was fascinating and they loved it. Now, this is the primary passage where a lot of people will go to, which is Leviticus 23:36. Now, this Shemini Atzaret has a lot of tradition surrounding it, specifically from Judaism, and a lot of Messianic congregations have simply adopted a lot of Judaistic practices regarding Shemini Atzaret. And I think, as you can see from this passage, what is the basic instruction for Shemini Atzaret? Get together and present an offering by fire. That's exactly what we got for Yom Teruah. We got a little bit more specific instructions for Yom Kippur, which was regarding afflicting your soul. But this one just simply says, on the 8th day you shall have a holy convocation, which is what we're doing right now, and presenting an offer by fire. I consider the best we're going to do in that regard is to say our prayers because, you know, your prayers are like incense on the altar in a figure of speech that David uses in the Psalms. So, you know what, if you want to say that's an offering by fire, fantastic. It is an assembly, an Atzaret. You shall do no laborious work. So this is a high Shabbat. No work is permitted from sundown to sundown for today until tomorrow evening. It is called by different names. It is called Simchat Torah. This is related to the Torah cycle because this is the end of the Torah cycle. Next week, next Shabbat, will begin Genesis 1:1, right back through to the beginning. And so this weekend did not actually have a Torah portion. If you want to look at it closely, there's special readings for the High Holy Day. but the Torah cycle will start over. But this is the joy of Torah. Simchat Torah is to celebrate the closing of the cycle of readings. Now, the last or eighth great day is just a traditional phrase in Judaism. That phrase doesn't actually appear in the text anywhere. Sometimes it's called a closing celebration, ending the cycle of the feasts. Sometimes it's a day of holding or restraining, where the king asks his guests to stay a little while longer. You probably heard other people talk about this, like there's the king throws this great 7-day feast, and then he's like, we're gonna tack on an extra day just because I want my family to just stay another day, you know? And I think that's got a neat connotation to it. But I would say that these are mostly traditions. Now, I will say that is there a special mystical meaning for this day? Undoubtedly. It is a great mystery, though. And if you're interested, I would say that you should check out this teaching called A Time Beyond Time. That is Shemini Atzaret from 2017, which Brother Keith taught here at the fellowship, going way back in the day. A great teaching in which he brought together a lot of these mysteries within Judaism and what this day means, and kind of tied some things together. I thought it was a very nice teaching, and I think that you would enjoy that if you want to dig deeply into the idea of Shemini Atzaret. Now,
What was his name again?
Keith, he's a member of our congregation, and he taught. If you just look at on our YouTube channel, there are playlists. And one of them is the Moedim, all the holy days, and you'll look at there and you'll see one called A Time Beyond Time, and that one was by Brother Keith. That was from 2017. Mike.
So, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. You said the last or eighth great day is how it's referred to traditionally.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where, are we seeing that in John when he goes to the Feast of Sukkot and it's referred to as the last great day?
Yes. Well,
That time?
I don't have a solid memory of that. Did you want to look that up and pull that out?
It's John 7:37.
And then the last day, the great day of the feast.
Is that where he cries out?
Yeah. If any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink.
Right. Yes. So, yes, that is correct, Mike. Yes, absolutely.
So at that point in time, traditionally it was already being referred to as the last great day.
That's my understanding, yes. As far as why, that's different tradition, a little bit digging deeper, which I think Brother Keith did a good job of digging behind the scenes for that. Microphone to Angela, please.
Were you saying eighth great day? Was the phrase not found?
Yes, the last or eighth
No.
the great day.
Eighth great day.
Yeah, the eighth great
The
day.
last great day is in there, but eighth great day.
Yeah, eighth great day is not really in there, but the last great day, it's phrased in a different way sometimes. But yes, I think Mike's mention of John chapter 7 does mention that the last great day of the feast. Anybody else? Okay, so I hadn't decided that I was going to do a big Shemini Atzaret teaching just because Brother Keith did a great job, and it's a lot of speculation. So I thought there was a great opportunity here to deal with some things in the book of James, which is in the last section of chapter 4 of the book of James. So we're going to go to the end of the book of James chapter 4. And I think that we're going to wrap up James chapter 4 today, and then when we get together next time, we'll go right into James chapter 5, which is the last chapter of the book of James. We are moving closely through, getting that done. So are there any questions, comments, or concerns regarding Shemini Atzaret?
Oh, not regarding Shemini Atzaret.
That's fine.
I was going to ask what we're doing after James.
Yes, Hayden asked, what are we doing after the book of James? That's a great question, and I know that there had been a lot of talk about doing a teaching about Bible study about Bible study methods. Is it, yeah, you got a thumbs up for that? That's good. Okay. Yeah, that would be a short thing, probably a one-time study or maybe a 2 or 3. Who knows? It could turn into a 10-time study. But I don't think so. Angela's shaking her head. No, do not do that. Okay. No, I just thought it would be, I thought it would be a good idea to just go over some basic Bible study methods, which I find useful, and I'm sure that you all have, and I would be very much excited to hear as we discuss it your favorite methods and strategies and tactics for digging into the Word. So that would be a sharing time, but I'll share with you my strategies and hope that they'll be helpful to you. So does anybody have any? Yes, Brother Brett.
And I haven't watched the Keith's video, but I know we've all heard of days 1,000 years for Yah.
Right.
So like 6 days were for man, 6,000 years.
Mhm.
The 7th day, the millennial rest.
Mhm.
And then after that, Shemini Atzaret, or the 8th
Right.
Psalm or Great Day.
Right.
Which time, like his title was like Time Beyond Time.
Yeah, he's basically, but then that's the point that Brother Keith was making in that study was, Hayden, you can take that if you want, that, you know, the 7,000 years are encompassed there in the feast cycle. The 7,000th year would be the millennium, and then at the end of the millennium, we're going into the great unknown. You know, the Father's coming down. Yeshua is relinquishing all authority to his Father, and we got like almost no information about what's going on at that point. But Keith did a good job, I think, of pointing out how that's very likely the point of this great 8th day, or however you want to call it, that is time moving forward into perpetuity after the 1,000-year millennium of Messiah. And I think there's a good point to be made, and that's primarily what Brother Keith dealt with in his teaching there. And I think it's very good stuff. So thank you for that, Brother Brett. So good enough? Excellent. All right. Well, let's do a little bit of study in the book of James. There's some very, very interesting stuff here, which I think is really, really relevant. But it should be fairly quick. So let's take a look at it. So we're in the book of James, coming up through the end of chapter 4, and here's the section that we are going to be dealing with today. And frankly, we don't need to deal with it too heavily because I think there's some redundancy here for stuff that we've already talked about a little bit at least. And here's what it says from James chapter 4, verses 11 through 17. Do not speak against one another, brethren. He who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks against the Torah and judges the Torah. But if you judge the Torah, you are not a doer of the Torah, but a judge of it. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and to destroy. But who are you who judge your neighbor? Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this and that city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. Yet you don't know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if Yah wills, we will live and also do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin. These are really powerful passages, but I think you can see that this ties together really nicely regarding what we have dealt with in the book of James so far. There's a lot of redundancy in the book of James. He's hitting a certain number of points really hard, continuously, vociferously, because he thinks they're really important, and I think they're absolutely critical. And so, the first thing we're dealing with is not speaking against your brothers and sisters. Now, you know that the speak evil in this text is actually used 3 times by James in this section. So he's really emphasizing it. And evil speech, or speaking evil, is katalaleo in the Greek. And it means to talk down to or to slander someone. And what I think we can come to the conclusion of, based upon our other studies that we've done so far in the book of James, because remember, we can't divorce this from the context of what just came before it. If you'll remember in chapter 3, he started saying, "Let not many of you become teachers, my brethren." And we looked at that and decided that he may not have meant teachers as in what you're thinking of as being a teacher. He was most likely talking about being a leader who is a judge, okay, because we will be under stricter judgment. And then immediately he launched in the use of the tongue and how he went on this long diatribe about the tongue sets our lives on fire and is set on fire by the flames of hell, and that ships are controlled by a little tiny rudder. He made a big section, a bunch of metaphors describing how difficult it was to tame the tongue. He's still talking about this same thing in the very next chapter, quite a ways. He's still talking about taming the tongue and not judging your brothers, not speaking ill about your brothers. And I think based upon the context of what we had right from the beginning of chapter 3 all the way through to here, that we are not necessarily talking about, I think what I can say is we're most likely talking about prejudging. Prejudging your brothers and sisters based upon how they look, the type of clothing they wear, the strata of society that they come from, maybe even their history. You know what I'm saying? So you look at somebody and you have a prejudgment in your mind regarding, who they are, how they appear to you. And that is a judge with an evil motive. Tracy?
Looking at the Greek word for speak evil there, in the King James it says speak evil, not just speak against.
Right.
And it's a slanderer or a defamer, seducer,
Right.
backbiter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this can be interpreted in so many ways. I wanted to first, did I cut you off? Are you done, Tracy? Okay. So yes, I think that she's absolutely right. That this can be determined in a couple of different ways. There's so many different ways of looking at this katalaleo, and I think it literally is like to talk down to slander. But I think looking at the context of James, he's specifically talking about prejudging people, because he says, hey, some rich guy comes into your fellowship wearing a gold ring and nice clothes, and you treat him one way and the poor person a different way. That's evil. And so I think we're still on this same kind of idea about judging each other, but now we're getting a little bit deeper, not just about prejudging, but about speaking about one another. And and I know that speaking about each other, do you guys talk about each other behind your backs? Do you talk about me behind my back? Of course you do. It's okay. It's not okay, but it happens a lot. And I mean, it's so hard to not talk about people when they're not there, but I try to have that rule for myself as best I can, but it's a big stumbling block, because we've talked about this before, where it's like sometimes prayer requests are couched in evil speech. It's like, oh, we really need to pray for brother so-and-so. He's dealing with this. Like, oh, great. Would brother so-and-so be happy if he was sitting here that you're sharing that with us? So was somebody going to, okay. So, this evil speech, is it just me? Because everybody was looking at me like I was insane, and like you're all looking scandalized, like I would never do that. I'm like, really? Is it just me?
We were convicted.
No, but I think this is one of the hardest. In fact, it is the hardest. I mean, James tells us no man can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil and full of deadly poison. So James is telling us this is a tiny little part of your body that causes the most damage ever. It's incredibly damaging. Evil speech is incredibly damaging. And so here he's talking about speaking against each other. Now, Judging. He also mentions judging each other, and this is the word krino. You can see diakrino and krino. There are two different words that are used in this context a lot of times. And some people have said, and krino is to distinguish or to decide. Now there's a good sense of that word, where I need to distinguish good and evil, for example, or I need to make a good, righteous decision. That's very true. But in the context that we're dealing with here, it definitely has a negative connotation. And what that literally means is, if you're distinguishing and deciding, quote unquote, the fate of another by your prejudgment, by your evil speech, by your distinguishing in your own mind, you know, some have suggested, and the linguists actually can kind of prove this. It's not definitive, that krino is where we get the word criticize from. That criticize is linked to krino or diakrino. Now, here's the issue that I will bring to your attention, which I want you to think about. And this is where it gets into the problem of how it comes to him how has it come to him talking about you're judging the law? If you speaking against the law, I mean, you kind of get confused there for a minute. It's like, wait a minute. He starts about with talking trash. Then he's like, if you talk trash, you're a judge of the law, not a doer of the law. You're like, well, what is he talking about? Does anybody, I have an idea that I'll be delighted to share with you, but do you have any thoughts in your mind that you would share about what does it mean to you're a judge of the law instead of a doer of the law if you're actually judging your brother or talking evil about your brother? Jerry?
This is just a thought, but judging the law to me would be saying, excuse me, what good is that law? Why do we need that law?
Okay.
I don't like that law.
Well, that's what I think of.
If you want to obey it, go ahead, but I'm not going to.
Right.
This kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. That's kind of what I started thinking of when I started thinking about it. It's like judging the law. It's like I'm deciding which laws I like or which ones I don't or whatever. It's like, yeah, and I was like, how could that be? That doesn't really fit the context. But I don't know, Tracy.
Well, he spoke before about showing partiality in the law.
Mm.
And so when you're doing that, you're judging this command is good, this command is not good.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps there's a connection with that.
Yeah, I think those are good ideas. I like them both. I'll share mine with you, and I tried to, because I'm such a literalist, I lack imagination in a lot of ways. But I'm really trying to shoehorn, how does this all fit together? Because he put these words together for some reason. And I got to thinking about it, and this is one of the Bible study methods that I'll talk with you about. It's like one of the best things you can do when you come across a difficult, challenging passage is you write it down in your own language, from the original language, and then you ask yourself a lot of questions. Why? Why did he word it this way? Who is he talking about? When was he writing? Under what circumstance? What does he intend me to do with it? What does he intend for me to do with this information? So asking lots of questions is how I kind of came to this line of thought. And I'll share it with you, and you can let me know if you think I'm crazy. In order to speak evil about a brother, you must first do a couple of things. You must think highly of yourself. Right? In order to cast evil speech or make judgments about another person, you have to see yourself in a position above them in order to even think that way, right? So that's number one. You must think highly of yourself if you're going to put yourself in a position to judge, which is exactly the opposite of what James just told us in our last study of the book of James. Humble yourself before Yah, and He will lift you up. Okay? Second thing is, if you see yourself in that way, you will be seeing yourself as a partner with God. You'll be putting yourself on God's level, because he says here, there's only one lawgiver and judge. But when you start to think about your brothers and sisters in this way, what you're doing is you're elevating yourself right up there with God, saying, I have the ability to judge people. You have made yourself equal with God, which is exactly the opposite of what he said previously, which he was like, draw near to the Father, humbly submit to the Father, and he will come close to you. So this is exactly the opposite of what he was just talking about at the beginning of this chapter. So you must see yourself in a high position. You must perceive yourself as a partner with God. That's some incredible hubris and pride. And now you're in a position to judge people. You are now a judge of the law. Not a doer of the law, you're a judge of the law. That's my idea. It's kind of convoluted. Does anyone think it's worthwhile? If you do, you just take it and you can slap your own name on it and say you came up with it. How about that? Oh yeah, go ahead.
But I think about some of the things you're talking about. It reminds me about the scripture that says, as a man thinketh, so is he. That doesn't necessarily mean good or bad. It could be both. If you're thinking the right things, then you're going to say the right things.
Yeah.
And inevitably you will do the right things. When you think the wrong things, you will say the wrong things, and you will affect yourself and others.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think guarding your speech, I'm going to, Angela, Tracy, you go ahead, and then Angela.
Going back again to James chapter 2, he says, so speak and so do as one who is going to be judged by the Torah of liberty, the law of liberty. Judgment will be without mercy to the one not doing mercy. So it's, I think, also going back to that, as we said about speaking and doing as one who will be judged by the law. You are not a judge of the law is a judge of you.
Right.
And that goes back to Messiah. He is the Word of God. He is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart.
Yep.
And he judges you. You don't judge him.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I'll bring something to your attention in just a second. Angela.
It made me think of that, as you judge, so will you be judged.
Thank you very much.
And-
That's right where I was going.
And that, I think, goes along with incurring a stricter judgment. Because if you've placed yourself in that position of master over someone, like you are now God who gets to execute this judgment upon them, it seems to me you've put yourself in a very dangerous spot if that is now how he is going to judge you. And that, to me, seems like a deterrent to
Absolutely.
doing that.
That is, you took the words right out of my mouth. In fact, those are my notes, and I will read to you what I wrote here. It says, we have often thought that James was talking about, in the beginning of chapter 3, teachers who need to be careful about how they handle the Word of God, when he's actually talking about bringing yourself under judgment for being judgmental, that you incur a stricter judgment. Now we're being judged more strictly than others because of our judgmental attitude. And you can see, Gracie, this parallel passage that I will share with you now in Matthew 7:1. It says, do not judge lest you be judged. For in the way you judge, you will be judged. And by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you. And why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, and behold, the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Now you might say to yourself, Alan, why did you leave that verse 6 in there? Have you ever wondered about that? He's talking about judge not, lest you be judged. And then all of a sudden he's saying, don't give what is holy to the dogs. It's there for a reason. Okay, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. And you might have been asking yourself, why did you leave that in there? It's attached. It's very much an attached idea. Okay, so the question is, in this parallel passage, we got a couple of issues that we need to deal with here. Number one, people often take this parallel passage in Matthew and to make up stupid sayings like people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones and we're not supposed to judge anybody. This is not true. He is not. Do you guys believe me? We all on the same page here? Yeshua is not saying don't ever judge each other. That is not the case. What he is saying is don't be a hypocrite. Don't pick splinters out of your brother's eye made out of oak when you have a beam of oak. Now, if you've got a beam of oak in your eye and your brother has a beam of formicula or something in his eye, then maybe those are a little bit different things and you're not a complete hypocrite. But frankly, it'd be great if you didn't have anything in your eye, then you could see clearly to try and... Sorry, I think there's a car outside beeping. But seriously, the issue here is not that we are not supposed to judge. We are supposed to judge righteously, and I want to deal with that just briefly to kind of dig through that a little bit. Now, the misapplication of this passage is, well, it's never a good idea to judge anyone. We're not supposed to do that. Well, if that were true and we were never to correct one another, well, that would be a direct violation of several passages of Scripture, which tell us to, and we're going to deal with one of them shortly, which deals with, correcting our brothers and sisters in love, right? We know a lot of those passages. So if we were to say, well, we're not supposed to judge anyone, well, then we would be saying, okay, what would be the result of that? Well, our own sins would probably be unchecked, because frankly, I think that brothers and sisters correcting each other social pressure is a really powerful thing. You know what I'm saying? Think about this. Think about our society and the issue that we deal with in our society, which is homosexuality. Now, it wasn't very long ago that homosexuals were in the closet, so to speak. What were they doing in the closet? Hiding. They were hiding. Why were they hiding in the closet? Because the society around them viewed their behavior as an abhorrence. And they recognized that if they were open with that type of a lifestyle, that they would undergo persecution. Okay, so society does have the ability to check itself. And if we're watching each other, not like a hawk, I'm just looking for you, whatever you're going to do, that is not what is being discussed here. I don't think that we should be watching each other carefully. In your normal course of interaction, inappropriate behaviors, inappropriate speech is going to pop up. And if we're going to be man enough or woman enough, or have some sincerity with each other, be real with each other, we're going to say, ought not to do that, ought not to think that. But man, if you're doing that, and then you tell them not to do it, this is exactly what Yeshua is talking about. You got a log in your eye trying to pick your brother's splinter out. Okay, so this is a big problem. We are to engage in righteous judgment. So if we don't arrest this, if we don't watch each other, then what happens is there's no social pressure around us. Our own sin can become unchecked, which spreads and spreads and spreads. This is how evil encompasses a society in a very short period of time. Because if you don't, I have mentioned to you on many an occasion that this is what Yah, we used to listen to in the Torah cycle, that Yah would say, purge the evil from among you. What I have always interpreted that as flush the toilet. Yeah, there's stuff, I don't want to see any uncleanness around you. Flush the dang toilet. I cannot be in the midst of a people that has filth and perversion and evil speech and wicked thoughts and wicked deeds. I can't be there among you. Just can't do it. So, we are not to delight in pointing out the sin of others. And we are not supposed to do this. So, yeah, if we don't correct each other, if we don't correct ourselves first, it's got to start in the heart, right? Because everything proceeds out of the heart. We got to correct ourselves. We got to keep a short leash on our own sins first. Then we'll have the ability to see clearly and to make a righteous judgment regarding the other people around us, which we can do gently and in love. And then we can arrest the spread of evil that just spreads right from my heart to you, to the whole congregation, to the whole neighborhood, to the whole freaking society. Look around you. It's a flaming dumpster fire because somebody said, we can't judge. We don't want to judge. Gracie, give that girl a microphone.
Every time I think of what you're talking about right now, it reminds me, don't forget, Grace, that you need to check with the Lord and let Him show you your heart before you go climbing on other people. And so when I really get feeling like, man, I need to tell her this, but how do I word this? And right away the Lord will tell me, the Spirit is faithful.
No, I totally understand. And here's something that I will point out to you. We have to be able to judge between, well, we have to judge righteously, yes. But what I'm about to say is there is a fine and very difficult line to walk between being circumspect and judging righteously and being a coward. Not wanting to stir the pot. Not having the testicular fortitude to stand up to a brother and say, hey, you know how hard that is to correct someone in love? And yes, it has to be in love and it has to be in private. Velma. It has to be in love and it has to be in privacy. That's really hard to confront a brother in sin. I can tell you that in all of my 50 years of being in church, you know how many times I've seen that? I could count them on one hand and I don't even need all of my fingers. It just doesn't happen.
Sometimes I find in my own life that when I feel like there's something that God's wanting me to share with someone, I have to take that person's character into consideration and how to appropriately deal with that person. Everyone deals with things differently and sees things and absorbs things differently.
Yeah.
I look at it like serving food. If you don't serve the food correctly, they won't eat it.
Well, if you don't feed them something that they would like to eat.
That's right.
Well,
so
I think
when
you're
you
absolutely
have
right.
something to correct, if you have a piece of bread and something not so good in the middle of the bread and then another piece of bread on top, they're eating that, which you served them, with gladness because of the way you served it, because it opened a door of their heart and they can see clearly that you're coming from love and not judgment. And it's like, wow, I never saw things that way.
Yes.
But when you show things that way, you can't give something you don't possess.
Absolutely. And that's where it becomes really critical that you use wisdom in dealing with each and every brother and sister, that you know who you're talking to and how to talk to that person. But you know what? You know what makes it really hard to do that? If you don't really know them. You know what I'm saying? That's why I keep pushing for the last decade. We got to get to know each other or we won't know each other. Tracy?
We were watching Bill Cloud this weekend, and he said something that I think we all need to kind of really take to heart, is that, you know, we all want to share the truth with people, and even, you know, in this type of situation when you're trying to correct somebody with the truth, that the kindness of God needs to reach them first before the truth. Because if they can see that kindness and mercy in you, then they can receive that truth a whole lot easier. If you're coming down on them, looking down on them in judgmental way or condemnation, or, you know, just something that, like Velma was saying, you're not going to swallow it very well. You're not going to take it very well. So kindness and mercy is huge.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great insight. Evelyn. Great insight. Very good.
I was just thinking that it's not just, what we say with our tongues, but it's what we think as well. And so much of it comes down to relationship with God, because it's really not our wisdom, It's God's wisdom. And that really comes down to trust, because, we have a real tendency, I think, if we don't trust God, we do judge a lot around us because we're trying to keep ourselves safe instead of understanding ultimately that it's God that keeps us safe. And so that key is trust and relationship.
Yeah.
And that's what allows us to surrender and have the inflow of, God come in and direct
Absolutely.
our own wisdom, direct our thinking.
Absolutely, that's a great insight. And I think that a corollary to that would be that if you don't trust in God very well, you could see your brothers and sisters around you as pawns to be maneuvered around to get your way. You'll begin to see people as tools. If you don't trust in God, you'll start trusting in people. And then manipulating those pieces becomes important. If you're trusting in people rather than God, manipulation becomes a key part of that game. Right? I think that's a good point. Good point. So I want to bring to your attention this next passage from Matthew, which is coming right along with this, which is Matthew 18:15, which you're all familiar with. It says, "And if your brother sins, go and reprove him in private. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. But if he does not listen to you, take one or two more with you, so that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every fact may be confirmed." This is a quote from the Torah. "And if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the congregation. And if he refuses to listen even to the congregation, then let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector." Meaning, fellowship is broken. If you try to correct a brother, we do it in private, we do it in love, we approach them in the right spirit. If they listen and say, "By golly, you're right, I apologize." Maybe they hurt you, or maybe they're just engaged in some sin and they say, "Yeah, I understand that. I need to change this." Then they turn and no one ever knows about it except you and them. And we talked about this a while back regarding shame, covering the shame. This is what God did with Adam and Eve. He sacrificed an animal and covered their shame. They immediately knew they were naked and felt guilt and shame. This is the problem that a lot of us probably have is, confronting someone is, if you're not trustworthy and they don't know that you're really concerned about them and not you, and not being in a position of judging the law and having the authority and having the moral high ground, if they genuinely sense that you can be trusted, then you'll probably have a lot better chance of having them recognize and have their eyes open and in gentleness say, "You're right." Because they know that you would never say anything about it. And that's the best possible outcome, is that they recognize their sin and they turn from it and no one ever knows about it except you and them. And because you're trustworthy and you are trying to do your best to cover their shame, you never bring it up. It's like it never happens. James will talk about this in James chapter 5. The one who turns a sinner from his ways knows he's saving your soul. A multitude of sins can be turned away. So that's a big one right there. But you notice that Yeshua is going even a little bit deeper than the Torah command, because he quotes the Torah right there, "By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every fact may be confirmed." That's from what? Deuteronomy? Deuteronomy 19, okay, where it's talking about witnesses. If any accusation is made, this is also talking about the person who makes a false accusation. And whatever punishment they were hoping to throw upon you comes right back to them. There's also a proverb about this. The one who is digging a pit often falls into the pit that he was digging for someone else. Okay, so one witness does not rise up, but Yeshua takes that just a little bit deeper. Notice this is what Yeshua also always does with the Torah. He takes you on a little journey a little bit below the surface. And he says, hey, almost in a sense saying, hey, by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every fact may be confirmed, but I'm going to take you a little bit deeper. Go to your brother in private. Don't even get that second witness involved. if you don't have to, right? Because that would be a judgmental person, a self-righteous person, a person who sees himself as a judge is going to immediately say, I'm going to go get me a second witness. Or a third. Or by golly, I'm jumping right to the congregation. I'm going to go tell the congregation. Yeshua says, no. Privately, one-on-one, face-to-face. Deal with it one-on-one first. So he's taking you a little bit deeper. He's revealing the basis of love from the Torah command. And then the Torah says this person who gives a malicious witness, he's given the punishment that he had hoped that would be heaped upon his brother. But what does Yeshua say? Treat him as a tax collector. Just shun him. Just push him away. Just don't have anything to do with him because he is not in repentance. Right? So now the Torah command would be he's going to get punished with the precise punishment that he was hoping to afflict on someone else. But Yeshua is saying, no, we're going to be a little more merciful than that. We're just going to cut ties. Why is that? Possibly because they're in exile. That's the way we are. You might get some crazy righteous individual saying, we need to stone people. Yeah, I understood, dude. Okay, maybe when Jesus sets up the kingdom, you're going to be stoning homosexuals again. You're going to be stoning adulterous. Okay, that's fine. But you live in exile. Render unto Caesar and all that. You live by the laws where God has placed you in exile. So we cut ties and we say, your sin will infect everybody around you. You need to be in quarantine, right? This is what we're essentially talking about. You need to be quarantined. Tracy, I apologize for delaying your response.
That's okay. I was just thinking about Haman with the gallows and how he was, setting up this judgment for the Jews. And then by the end of it, because of the righteousness of the people and not trying to take matters into their own hands, and the king saw what was going on and he was punished to die on the thing that he created to kill the Jews. So it's the same concept.
Perfect illustration, absolutely. And now I'll take you back to Matthew 7 for just a moment where he says, do not give what is holy to dogs. And do not cast your pearls before swine, or however he said that. Having discussed this now and thought about it for a couple minutes in the greater context, can you make heads or tails of that? Does it maybe bring in a little bit of insight for you? Think about what is a dog and what is a pig. In Judaism, in Judaistic thought, a dog is an ignorant animal. It doesn't really know the difference between, it'll eat its own poo-poo, or it'll eat a steak. It has no discernment. It's an animal, okay? But a pig, it kind of has this connotation of purely unclean. It knows the difference between right and wrong, and it will do wrong. You notice the difference in those two reactions to the animals, okay? Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before the swine, because notice what the pigs will do. They will trample them under feet and then turn and tear you to pieces. Okay, so we're talking about two different animals here. Dogs, which don't really know the difference between the holy and the profane, and pigs, which are wholly unclean, know the difference between right and wrong, and will gore you to death if given an opportunity. And how does this relate to judgment? There's a simple parallel in the Proverbs. And we know that James and Yeshua are both elaborating deeply on the Proverbs, which says, do not get in the way of a fool and his folly. Do not try to correct an imbecile and a fool, because you will only get scorn heaped on you. Okay, that's a great, what's the difference? The difference is, what?
What is the reference?
Oh, the reference. I don't know. I apologize for not digging it up, but I can get it for you. So the point here is, if you don't try to correct someone who you know in your heart is not interested in correction. You don't go up to a sinner, and I have mentioned to this before, I've mentioned this to you before, and people have been horrified that I would say this. I apologize, I will say it anyway. We have so many examples in the Bible of missionaries going out and preaching. But what's most fascinating is they're preaching to the choir. Paul went to a Jewish synagogue on almost every single occasion during his missionary journeys. He was going to the people of God and he was saying, pay attention, wake up, repent, turn to Yeshua. There was one time in the book of Acts where he went to just the regular old pagan place and started yelling at people in the street. What happened? He got the crap kicked out of him and ended up half dead outside the city. I think that was a learning opportunity. So does it mean that you should go downtown and stand on the corner of the college campus down there during a gay pride parade and smack people on the head with your Bible? What do you think's going to happen? That is this is not proper judgment. This is foolishness. That's a lack of wisdom. Okay? There are plenty of people who are willing to hear the word of God if you want to talk to them about it. The world is full of people who would rather kill you than hear the word of God. There's no reason to get yourself killed. It's throwing your pearls before a swine or a dog. But see, I know a lot of Christians say, Alan, you are absolutely wrong, man. We got to be out there pounding the pavement and telling everybody. No, absolutely not. That's my opinion. You can come against me if you want, because I'll tell you what, you know this to be true. They don't care what you know until they know that you care. Your witness to people that you don't know, they don't trust you. They don't know you. Okay? You have a much greater impact, A, by interacting with people that you know, and B, your life and your light speaks way louder than your words. Just throwing that out there, you guys. You can totally tell me I'm wrong, and I'm totally okay with that. Tracy, tell me I'm wrong. It's okay. I don't mind.
No, I just was going to see if this was the verse you're looking for, because this is the one that came to my mind because someone was asking. Proverbs 26:4, do not answer a fool according to his folly, lest you also be like him.
Yes. And there are like 4 or 5 of those, man. Those are all over in the Psalms. Proverbs 23:9.
And also Messiah says something about agreeing with your enemy while you walk with him in the way.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, he's going to turn on you. So
yes. That could also be, that could also come around to that same way of thinking. But
You'll end up going to the courts. And
what was that reference, Tracy? 27? 26. Proverbs 26?
Proverbs 26:4.
26:4. Yeah. So I just think if you're going to correct people, do it right. Okay? Correct somebody who you think at least has an opportunity to turn their heart. Because here's the other problem, and I think, and here's another proof of what I'm telling you. We talked about this a while ago. Why do you think Yeshua spoke in parables? Think he was trying to confuse people? No. He didn't want them to hear the whole truth. He didn't want to make it plain to them. Now that's again an abomination to a lot of people. And I've mentioned to you before, he was wide open with his truth until people started fighting with him. As soon as those Pharisees and Sadducees stood up and started arguing with him, he immediately started talking in parables. And the disciples asked him, why did you all of a sudden start talking in parables? He's like, so that when they're hearing, they will not hear. Seeing, they will not see. Why would he do that? Because he knows their hearts. He knows they're not willing to listen, and he's saving them from the responsibility of what James just told us. To the one who knows the right thing to do and doesn't do it, it is sin. God is gracious to the ignorant. Now, I am not advocating for ignorance, but what I am saying is God is gracious to the ignorant. So you going to someone who has a hard heart and is not willing to hear the words of your God, and you just blowing up and throwing up all over them and saying, here's a pile of truth for you to choke on. Now you're responsible for it. Go in peace, be warmed and be filled. That is not loving. Jerry, you tell it, Jerry. I'm okay with it. Ella, you think that's funny?
I think the reason that Yeshua talked in parables, and this is what I have read from somebody else, is if he had, like he was saying, if he had told them the truth, they would have got a worse judgment.
Yeah.
And by telling them a parable that they didn't understand, they might be not quite so deep down in hell
Absolutely.
for eternity.
Absolutely. And I think, the Spirit, he demonstrated very capably that the Spirit of God will open your ears to hear the truth. And I remember a story about a pastor who went to see this, he was training to be a missionary, and he was learning all these, these tactics of arguing with your opponents and, with those apologetics and stuff. And it's like, man, you got to go check out brother so-and-so. He's winning souls to the Lord left and right, man. You got to study his methods. And he's like, okay, man, yeah, I'm ready. He went and watched this dude, and man, this dude was mangling the gospel. It was horrified. He was horrified. He's like, what are you telling these people? You've got it all wrong. He wasn't telling them the wrong things, but he was saying it in the wrong way. It was not persuasive at all. But hundreds of people were coming to the Lord from this guy who could barely talk. He could barely string words together. Why? Because the Spirit of the Lord spoke through him. His words didn't matter. He could practically be speaking in tongues. He could be speaking gobbledygook. It didn't matter. Those people's ears were opened by the Spirit of their Father, and they heard what he was saying. Whereas all of your eloquence and all of your dialectics and all of your carefully crafted dialogue, they spit upon it. Because it's the Spirit of your Father who opens their ears, not your clever words. So Yeshua can give these really veiled parables, and the people whose ears were opened could hear them and understand them. And those who needed to be protected from knowledge that would have been damaging to them were protected.
God's mercy.
That's God's mercy. And so, it's kind of similar to what we're dealing with here, with judgment, okay? You knowing the heart of your brother and sister and saying, I can see that he's got a hard heart. I can see that she has a hard heart. You just talk to him a little bit. Start touching around the edges of whatever this issue is that they're dealing with, and you're getting some strong pushback without even, it's a sore spot. You can sense that. And you know, I might be doing damage to the relationship, I might be doing damage to myself, and I might be doing damage to them. But if their sin is egregious enough, and it needs to be called out because it's damaging enough to the people around them, we got to be discernful and mindful of that. Regardless of whether you think they're going to hear it or not, you've got to tell them, and I've had to do this on occasion here in this fellowship. It's like, hey, you can't come to this fellowship and do that. What are you talking about? Well, it's in the Bible right here. Well, I don't see it that way. I really don't care how you see it. This is what it says. Your opinion about what it says is irrelevant. So, there are times when you have to call a brother or sister out and say, we can't have that in the fellowship. So you have to judge with righteous judgment. Any comments, questions, or concerns about righteous judgment? Please don't go around judging each other. Hey, if something's going on and somebody needs to be corrected, let's do it the right way. There is correction that is needed at all times. Let's just do it right. Gracie?
It's just a matter of remembering that when you see something that you think isn't right, ask the Lord to just show them.
Yeah.
And if he taps you on the shoulder and says, you do it,
Right.
pray up that you'll be going in love
Yeah.
and speak the truth in love, and he will
Right.
speak through you. Otherwise, you're just doing it in your own strength and you're in trouble.
And thank you for that, Gracie. I think that's a great insight. I mean, if you see something that needs to be addressed, I think you spend a couple of days. Yeah, you spend a couple of days in prayer with your Father, and you say, Father, I see this. I need to know what to do with this. Could you soften their heart? Begin to weigh on their spirit and make me sure, make my heart right and help me. Yeah, I'd take a couple of days and talk to the Father and figure out, how should I handle this? Because this is a difficult thing. Now, the next little section here is, come now you who say, we're going to go do this and make some money. And he's like, you don't even know if you're going to be alive. And I think this is a real simple kind of thing. I mean, a good preacher could wax eloquent for a couple of weeks on this thing, but what I'm going to do is just show you a couple of passages, which I think are good parallel passages, and we can just discuss it briefly. But here's Psalm 103:14, which expresses a similar sentiment, which is he himself knows our frame, or the way we're built. He is mindful that we are but dust. As for a man, his days are like grass. As a flower of the field, so he flourishes. And when the wind has passed over it, it's gone, and its place doesn't acknowledge it anymore. Okay, a human being is a short-lived creature. Proverbs 27:1 says, do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring forth. And here's Ephesians 5:15. Therefore be careful how you walk, not as unwise men, but as wise, making the most of your time, because the days are evil. You got a limited amount of time to do a great deal of work. Use your time wisely. Ecclesiastes, I thought this was a good one. Whatever your hand finds to do, truly do it with all your might. For there is no activity or planning or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are headed. I again saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, and the battle is not to the warriors, and neither is bread to the wise, nor wealth to the discerning, nor favor to men of ability, for time and chance overtake them all. Moreover, man does not know his time. Like a fish caught in a treacherous net and birds trapped in a snare, so the sons of men are ensnared at an evil time when it suddenly falls on them. So these are all passages which are expressing what we saw in James, saying, don't boast about what your plans are for the future. Now, that some people can take that a little too far, and it's totally okay if somebody says, hey, we're going to do this if the Lord wills, and that's fine. Sometimes it can become a trite little statement that people just tack on to the end of things, and they're not really thinking about it. I think it just behooves us to be circumspect. Circumspect meaning going around a point and examining it from every angle. Okay, that just means be wise. Yes, you should make plans. You should have short-term and long-term plans, and you should carry them out with all your heart, but you should recognize that your life is in His hands. And you should literally say, if I live, then I may be able to do this or that. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't plan. You shouldn't just go through life every day saying, whatever happens, God's going to do what God's going to do. Man, I know so many people. And there are passages in your New Testament, and I challenge you to go and find these. There is a common idea in biblical scholarship that the apostles and the people living in the time of just after Yeshua was resurrected, they literally thought the end of the world was upon them. And it is a problem that many of them, because they thought that the end of the world was upon them, stopped working, went up on the roof, and waited for the rapture. Right? Okay? Dude, I don't care what is going on in the world around you, or if you're convinced that the rapture is next Tuesday, or that it does not matter. You have work to do on yourself, with your family, with your friends, in your fellowship. You got a lot of work to do, man. You cannot stop working. But recognize you don't know how long you're going to last. balance your plans with His. Frankly, His plans are from the foundation of the world. They're unstoppable. Okay, you compare and contrast your plans with His plans, it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. His plans are from eternity to eternity. And nothing, no one, as Paul says, is going to stop Him and say, what are you doing? No. His plans are from the beginning to the end. And every single thing that He proposes is going to happen exactly as He proposed it, exactly the way and the timing that He proposed it, perfectly. Your plans are like wood, hay, straw, and stubble. You know, they burn up. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have them, though. Do you think God's a planner? Well, here's the amazing thing I think about God. He planned this all once. It's not like He needs to worry about it. It's like, oh, I wonder how my plan is doing. I got to check how what's Brother Brett doing? Because if Brother Brett screws this up, it's going to put a kink in my plans, and then I'm going to have to set him aside and find somebody. No. His plans do not need you. He's delighted to have you as a partner, right? He's delighted to have you as a partner. He loves people who are willing to get on board with the plan and help. But you screw up, you bow out, it's 100 people like you. He doesn't need you. He'd love to have your help, but He doesn't need you at all. He can accomplish everything He wants with no human help at all. Because unfortunately, what happens if you start thinking like that is you're sovereign, not Him. If He's dependent upon you and what you're going to do, then you're God, not Him.
I come across a lot of people in my industry, young and old, fretting about what's happening in the world and in their lives individually. And I tell them, if God is your maker and you are in the palm of His hand, you have nothing to worry about but following His word, His will, His way, His purpose, His plan, and His path. And that old song that says He's got the whole world in His hand, He still does. He didn't make any mistakes in the beginning and try to fix them all along the way. He's got a plan set in motion. Be happy you're in that plan and try to do the best you can with it.
That's right. That's right. He's got the whole world in His hands. He ain't dropping no balls. So I think, His plans are foundational. Yours are not. Work with Him. He's happy to have help. He loves helpers who work with a cheerful heart. And you should definitely make plans. Just be mindful of your longevity, because it reminds me of this passage from Luke. You knew I was going here, Luke 16 and 15. And He said to them, beware and be on your guard against every form of greed. Take notice the key here is greed. You get the idea that James was also talking about greed? For not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions. And He told them a parable saying, the land of a certain rich man was very productive. And he began reasoning to himself, saying, what shall I do, since I have no place to store my crops? And he said, this is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years to come. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But Elohim said to him, you fool, this very night your soul is required of you. And now who will own what you have prepared? So is the man who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward Elohim. So this is not, he starts with talking about greed and ends with talking about greed. And you can get the sense from James as well that you got a little bit of greed going on here. You are presumptuous in your plans. We're going to go to this city and we're going to make some money and we're going to do this. There's a certain bit of, this is what is called the pride of life. This is what is called the pride of life. Just being proud in your own achievements and having a sense of pride about everything that you can accomplish. Okay, you should work hard. You should seek to achieve great things for other people. Man, here is something I want to tell you. This is fascinating, and I'll end with this. I don't think I really need to say much about to the one who knows the right thing to do and doesn't do it, to him it is sin. That's just self-evident. But I want to end with this story, and it's about having a proper perspective. You know that people have, the field of psychology was really coming of age just after the Civil War, the American Civil War. And William James and B.F. Skinner was a little bit before that, but Freud and these people began to discover dealing with what they called melancholiacs, what we today would call clinically depressed people. And they said, this was written at the time of the Civil War, give me 14 days and I can cure anyone from depression. What? I was reading this and I was like, what? What are you talking about? You know what they discovered? They said, a person who is depressed has no concern for the feelings of others. And if we can, and what they did is they said, what we need to do is we can cure them in 14 days if we can get them to do something nice for someone once every day. Cured. But you know, they would always push back. They would, because the psychiatrist would be talking to these people and saying, why don't you try this? And they would always say, why would I do that? Why, they've never done anything nice for me. What am I going to get out of this? This was the weirdest thing. And I thought, my gosh, it has not changed at all. And I have been talking about, this for a long time, and I just read this from like the Civil War period, and I was like, good Lord, it's the same thing I've been saying forever. I know that you can, and I'm not suggesting that there's not chemical imbalances with, people that, struggling with this kind of thing, but man, you can come across this problem where with a person who is suffering from depression, it often has a sense of hopelessness attached to it, and a sense of aimlessness, and a sense of a lack of purpose. And these people from the Civil War era were saying, look, just get out of your own head. Find someone around you that you can do something nice for once a day, and you will be cured of your depression in 14 days. And it worked every single time, except for a handful of people who kept pushing back and saying, why would I do that? I don't know these people. They haven't done anything for me. What's in it for me? I don't get it. I was like, wow, that's simply crazy. That's stunning. But it kind of ties in here where you think about these, greed. Don't worry about your own interests. Worry about the interests of someone else. And if you are engaged in some activity, some job as a housewife or a husband who's working, whatever it is, your boss you're his servant. Your wife, you are her servant. The husband is a servant to the wife, and the wife is a servant to the husband, and they are both serving the children. Man, when you truly humble yourself and see yourself as a servant, looking for people to serve, man, you got all kinds of good things going on. You got purpose, and you got many blessings, and you're not looking in for what am I doing? What's in it for me? What am I doing over here? You kind of have this. You lose sight of yourself, and I think losing sight of yourself is one of the best things you can possibly do. Remember that old song we used to sing in church? Just forget about yourself. And magnify the Lord and worship Him. Go ahead.
This is something that I try to practice. I do it pretty much every day. Driving to work, I say, Lord, let me be a blessing or give something kind or good to someone every single day. And I've come across people that older people have a lot to worry about. They don't have a lot of income. And young people too, they just have struggles. I said, if you could do something for 30 days, I want you to come back to me after the 30 days and tell me how it affected you. I said, think about it in this way. Lord, what can I do? A handshake? A smile?
Could be, yeah.
Monetarily?
Simple.
Hug somebody? Just something good to one person every day. And then in 30 days, you come back and tell me how that changed you.
Yeah.
Your whole life
Absolutely.
will completely change in 30 days if you did that every single
Well,
day.
and here's the simpleness of it that I think you really could boil it down to this. just ask somebody how they're doing. I mean, it really can be that simple. I mean, you know that's an icebreaker type of, commentary when you see somebody, hey, how you doing? No, I don't mean like that. I mean, you break the ice, great weather we're having, and then you sit them down and you say, how are you doing? Tell me what's going on in your life. Man, people open up when you actually show an interest in what's actually happening in their lives. Strangers will, absolutely, man. It's amazing what happens when you just have an interest in people. It's just amazing. I apologize for keeping you late, ladies and gentlemen. It is Shemini Atzaret. I hope that you still have a sense of party about you. I think we're going to party for an additional 7 days. I don't know why not.
I like that.
I think that'd be great. Anyway, it has been a most fascinating and awesome holiday season. I think it was a great holiday season. I can't wait to hopefully come around. If God allows me to live, then when the Passover comes around, we'll be holding a Passover festival. I think that'd be delightful. In the meantime, though, we got to get through the dark days of winter. Keep your spirits up. Reach out to somebody else. Do something for somebody else. Pray for somebody else. Ask somebody how they're doing. Call up a neighbor. Call up a friend. Call up a cousin. Call up an aunt or an uncle. Reach outside of yourself and feel the love and the peace, right?
Amen.
Let us pray.